About 3 days and 200,000 miles into the flight, Mission Control did miss the significance of a cryptic message from the astronauts.
Hello, I'm Faraday 28. Really? 1989.
Shadiest Spike 2.
This is mind-blowing stuff.
Hey, wait, isn't that Lee Strobel? Isn't he like, lawyer? What's he doing trying to teach science?
One of the most striking discoveries of modern science has been that the laws and the constants of physics, the numbers that govern the universe, unexpectedly conspire in an extraordinary way to make the universe habitable for life.
Unexpectedly? What did you expect? Tell us!
How do you know that the fine-tuner wanted to tune everything for life, of all things? Why are you so confidently claiming that everything was fine-tuned for our existence? Isn't it a bit arrogant to be so confidently claiming that the universe was fine-tuned for life just because we are here?
The universe hasn't been calibrated for life. Life is adapted for the universe.
Conspire.
Conspire? I've just got an image of numbers sat in a dark room over a piece of paper, plotting to bring about the revolution of life.
In other words, the universe is finely tuned on a razor's edge in a way that defies mere chance.
Defies chance? What?
Really? How? We derive our constants from pre-existing entities. Since we live in a universe with the constants the way they are, the probability of them turning out that way is 1 in 1. It's completely pointless to be speculating of what could have been when it's physically impossible to begin with. So pretty much your argument is, if things were different, things would be different. Convincing.
Oh, so it's on a razor's edge, is it? Let's see what happens when we push it off. The best analogy I could think of is if you get a paint bucket and throw it at a wall, the chance that you get that splash pattern there is negligible. But the fact you've done it defies all chance. But you've done it. You see how it works.
And which points powerfully and is best explained by the existence of a creator.
The existence of a creator. Before I get into that, I have to state life adapts to its environment. And if you're going to say this provides evidence for the existence of a creator, hey, this always puzzled me. Why do they only sell for one creator? Why not two creators? Or multiple creators? How do you know who the creator is? Or what is it? How did this creator come into be? Where did they come from? Or how did they create it? Any of these big questions, they always leave them unanswered.
Let me give you just a few examples. I want to start with my favorite one, which is the force of gravity.
It's my favourite one as well because it has no bearing on life.
The force of gravity is finely tuned to an incomprehensible degree so that life can exist. If you imagine the universe and imagine these giant dials, like the old Flash Gordon show. Remember those movies? I'm dating myself, but they were great back in the 60s.
All the dials. Now, here you're kind of assuming something. You're assuming that everything in the universe is separate. All the laws of the universe are separate, and that they're working together. When in fact scientists at the moment are working on the grand unified theory. It's not been figured out yet, but it will. String theory hits very close because it gets 3 out of the 4 forces. Well, the point being is that if you want to use dials, then it's not plural, it's dial.
But you got these, imagine the cosmos has these huge dials. And what I'm saying is, say there's about 30 of these dials or more, they are just absolutely precisely calibrated so that life can exist in an incomprehensible way.
Well, with this one dial that I've already established already, the chance of a number not coming up is impossible. Therefore, a number has to come up. If you spin that and it carries on spinning, it has to stop at a certain point. The chance of it stopping at that certain point is the exact same chance of anywhere else on that dial.
That can't be explained by mere chance. And so imagine one of these dials is the dial that controls the force of gravity. And what physicists have determined is the force of gravity could have been set over a wide range of possibilities. It didn't have to be where it is. Could have been at anything. In fact, they have calculated that the force of gravity, if you imagine a ruler that's stretched across the entire known universe and is broken down in 1-inch increments. So you got this ruler stretching billions of light years across the universe. That represents what scientists plausibly believe could have been the range at which gravity could have been set, anywhere along that range. But it happens to be set at just the right place so that life can exist in the universe. Now, what would happen if you took this ruler going all the way across the universe and you saw where gravity was set and you moved it by 1 inch compared to the width of the universe? What would happen?
This has got to be one of the dumbest analogies I have heard in a very long time. A 14 billion light-year long ruler with 1-inch increments? Are you kidding me? Notice how he doesn't really mention what number is counted on each increment, which seemed like it may be kind of an important thing to note. The gravitational constant is approximately 6 times 10 to the negative 11th power. If each increment is one whole number, then you'll bet your ass that there would be some big differences if it was pushed over 1 inch. But let's say that each inch represents 10 times 10 to the negative 50th power. Then there wouldn't be the slightest amount of difference if you would move it 1 inch, or 10 inches, or 100 inches. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't make any difference at all. And even if each increment was like 10 times 10 to the negative 15th power, it's kind of close, but each inch would still make such a small difference, it wouldn't even be noticeable.
Catastrophic consequences. Intelligent life would be impossible in the universe if you adjusted the force of gravity by 1 inch compared to the width of the entire known universe. That is how finely tuned it is. Is that an accident? Did that just happen by coincidence?
No. It's the way it is because it's physics, okay? We derive our constants from pre-existing entities. Pi is a constant. If you divide the circumference of a circle by the diameter of a circle, you will always get pi, no matter what. Pi is a constant. How can there possibly be a universe with pi not equaling 3.14 blah 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 blah? How can that happen? Exactly. It can't.
Well, that's just one example, as I said, of maybe as many as 30 or more ways in which these dials are set. Let me just give you another one. It's called the cosmological constant. That's a big word, but
Oh yeah? Try deoxyribonucleic acids.
But what it means is it's the energy density of space. And all you really need to know about the cosmological constant is it's got to be exactly right, or the universe falls apart.
No, but yet again, the cosmological constant isn't exactly right. It's an incredibly small but non-zero number. It's a means by Einstein to try and explain why the universe isn't contracting under its own gravity. And mind you, this was when he thought the universe was static and at equilibrium. We know now that it's not at equilibrium.
If the cosmological constant were a positive number and a large number, the universe would fly apart. Planets could never have coalesced. We'd have no sun. We'd have no stars. If the cosmological constant were a negative number and large, the universe would have just collapsed upon itself.
So, if it's not positive, and if it's not negative, then where the hell is it? You can't. A non-positive and a non-negative number would actually be zero. So, if you're saying the cosmological constant is zero, then you're saying it doesn't exist.
So the cosmological constant has to be exactly right in order for the universe to exist and for life to exist. How precisely does it have to be calibrated? Scientists have now determined that the cosmological constant is finely tuned to 1 part in 100 million billion 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 billion.
No, that's just how small it is. Also, in May 2006, it was put forward that a problem by the cosmological constant was indirect evidence of cyclic universes put forward by the string theory. In string theory, it's theorized that with each cycle of the universe, the cosmological constant subsequently gets gradually smaller, but never reaches a state of zero.
That's how precise it is. Now, how do you understand that number? Picture going on into outer space, and you look back at the Earth, and the Earth's about this big. You're way up in space in a space shuttle or something. The Earth's about that big. How finely tuned is the cosmological constant? The precision is so amazing. It would be as if you took a dart from outer space and you threw it at the Earth, and it hit the Earth, and it hit a bullseye 1/trillionth of a trillionth of an inch in diameter. That is how finely tuned the cosmological constant is. Is that a coincidence? It's mind-boggling. Now, if you just add together the fine-tuning of gravity and the cosmological constant, the two that I've talked about, the fine-tuning would be to a precision of 1 part in 100 million trillion, 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 trillion.
Well, congratulations. You know how to multiply fractions. That's good. That's good for you. However, the fractions that you're multiplying, the numbers, you're just pulling them out of your ass.
In other words, this fine-tuning would be the equivalent of 1 atom.
I don't know about the size of 1 atom, but I'm pretty sure it's not that small. I don't even think an electron is that small. Maybe on a quark. How small is a quark?
It takes 1 million atoms lined up to equal the width of a human hair. 1 atom compared to the entire known universe. That would be how the fine-tuning is if you just look at those two things, gravity and the cosmological constant. But as I said, there are dozens of other examples of the way in which these dials have been precisely set so that life can exist. For instance, the strong nuclear force. This is the force that binds the nuclei of atoms together. If you were to decrease the strong nuclear force by just 1 part in 10,000 billion, 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 all we would have in the universe is hydrogen.
Okay. Obviously that didn't happen. And even more importantly,
There is no quantitative expression of the strong nuclear force. Strobel should not be making claims about changing the value of a valueless expression. He possesses no evidence to suggest what would exist without electrostatic interactions. How do we know no other life would be possible? He is presenting a false dichotomy. Again, Strobel keeps thinking everything was made for us instead of thinking we are the result of adapting to the natural world.
No intelligent life would be possible. If you just changed it. 1 part in 10,000 billion, 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 billion. Or consider this. Unless the number of electrons is equivalent to the number of protons to an accuracy of just 1 part in a trillion, 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 then galaxies and stars and planets could never have formed.
this is just completely stupid, okay? The heaviest atom has somewhere around 108 electrons, okay? How can you possibly have 1/billionth of a billionth of a billionth of an electron in an atom? It just doesn't work that way. No. Furthermore, go name me an atom that has 1 billion electrons. And even furthermore, it doesn't matter if the number of electrons does not equal the number of protons. That's how you get ions and charged particles. You can learn this stuff in a general chemistry class.
It's unbelievable. I'll give you, just to illustrate that, one last example of the equivalency between electrons and protons. It would be, how finely tuned is that? That would be like taking a dime and stacking up dimes 236,000 miles to the moon. And then it would be like doing that in another pile and another pile, so that you have all of North America with dimes piled all the way up to the moon. And you choose one dime at random, and you spray paint it red, and you mix it up in all those dimes. And you have blindfold a person, and he reaches in, and he can pull out only one dime. It would have to be the red dime. In other words, his chances of pulling out the red dime would be one chance in a trillion, trillion, trillion.
Yes, yep. You're right. It's like standing on top of the Statue of Liberty and taking a shit into a fishbowl on the ground that is 1/billionth of a billionth 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 of a trillionth the size of a proton while it's windy.
Again, that's just one of the parameters. You put all of these together, and it makes a mind-blowing argument for the existence of a creator who set the parameters exactly right so that life could exist. He created a habitat for the people that he eventually created.
The universe is not very habitable for life, considering that we only live on the dry parts of a wet, cooling planet with a finite existence in one solar system, in one galaxy that we know of. Yeah, that's some pretty fine-tuning, isn't it?
Vera Kistiakowsky, who's a professor emeritus at MIT, physics, an expert in physics, former president of the Association of Women in Science, put it this way: the exquisite order displayed by our scientific understanding of the physical world calls for the divine.
One person's opinion versus 100,000, possibly millions of others in the scientific community?
It just calls for the divine. Now, how do atheists avoid this? I mean, you look at that and you go, is that not unbelievable evidence for the existence? Well, they say, wait a minute. What if there was another explanation? What if there were actually an infinite number of invisible universes that we can't see? And by chance, the dials, all these dials, they're spun at random. And because there's an infinite number of universes, we happen to be in the lucky universe. We happen to be in the one that had the dials, by chance, hit the exact right calibration so that life might be possible. And that's the only way I've seen that atheists have been trying to argue against this evidence. Because if you look at it as face, it is almost conclusive that God exists. The problem with that argument is there's absolutely no evidence of an infinite number of other universes.
No evidence of an infinite number of universes? Tell me, dude, what puts the brakes on quantum fluctuations? What stops the inflation at just the right time?
I find this funny because I frequently come across Christians trying to defend their own belief of God by saying he's hiding in another universe, in another realm, dimension or something, which is why we can't observe him in this one. These ones is basically saying that other universes can't exist. So if we do want to assume that this is the only universe, that means God is limited to this universe. Oh my God, he's limited to something. So if he's in this universe and only this universe, why can't we observe him?
Besides, as one physicist told me, I interviewed him for my books, named Robin Collins, interviewed for the Case for a Creator.
Oh, great. Robin Collins. Now I'm going to give you a little history background about this guy. He is a professor of philosophy at Messiah College. He's a PhD in philosophy, but he dropped out of the PhD in physics program at UT Austin. His actual studies conducted in philosophy, not physics or mathematics. And to see a full refutation of all of Collins' claims, link to the sidebar.
He said, you know what, even if the atheists are right, and there is an infinite number of other universes, it would provide only further evidence for a creator.
No, this isn't right, because the theory that's been put forward is that at the start of the Big Bang, there are many universes created, and each universe has the laws set at random. So you're trying to argue that because all these universes exist, there must be a creator. Well, no, because all these universes are random. You can't infer randomness to both finely tuned and a creator.
And I scratched my head and said, how's that possible? He said, I'll use my bread-making machine as an example. He had one of these old bread-making machines. He said, if you want to make an edible loaf of bread, you need a well-designed machine with the right circuitry, the right heating element, the right timer, and you have to have the right ingredients in the right order and in the right proportions, and if you do that, you get a loaf of bread. If you don't do it right, you get a hockey puck, basically, essentially is what you get. Now, he said, a universe is far more complicated than a loaf of bread. And if it takes a finely tuned mechanism and the right ingredients to produce a loaf of bread, then it would require a finely tuned mechanism and finely tuned process to produce many universes, and such a finely tuned mechanism calls out for a creator.
And there you go, strawmanning all these valid arguments, the multi-universe, blah, 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 but he ignores one valid argument, Occam's razor. It's funny how Strobel ignores this one. That's his apologetic game. Anything that easily refutes his word, he ignores it, to make it appear to the audience that no other valid counter-argument exists. Way to go.
So either way, the creator wins. So I believe that the evidence of physics by itself is so powerful. In fact, it was so powerful, it was successful as being a major reason that an atheist, educated at Harvard University, a professor at Georgetown University named Patrick Glenn, it was a central reason why he moved from atheism to Christianity.
Patrick Glenn, again, we just come back to another person's opinion, but if you want to talk about how many people have turned from atheism to theism, then I'm pretty sure the ratio of that from theism to atheism is substantially greater.
He wrote a book about it called God, the Evidence. And here's what he said. Today, the concrete data point strongly in the direction of the God hypothesis. Those who wish to oppose it have no testable theory to marshal, only speculations about unseen universes spun from fertile imaginations. Ironically, he said, the picture of the universe given to us by the most advanced 20th century science is closer in spirit to the vision presented in the book of Genesis, book of Genesis, book of Genesis, book of Genesis, book of Genesis.
And there you have it. Lee Strobel, ladies and gentlemen.
There are massive amounts of evidence for evolution. There are many fields of science that not only support evolution, they confirm evolution in great detail. There's genetics, there's paleontology, there's taxonomy, there's biogeography, there's speciation, genetic drift, species rings, there's embryology.
Okay, wait. If you keep on naming off things that support evolution, we're not going to have any time to start refuting.
Point taken. Hello, I'm Faraday 28.
Reunion 1989.
Chattiest Spike 2.
There's a lack of convincing evidence to back up Darwin's claim that there's a common origin to all life. Of course, there's what we call microevolution. Microevolution just says there's a variation between different kinds of animals.
Strobel clearly shows his lack of understanding between micro and macroevolution.
Microevolution is defined as change below the species level, which means the species have not speciated yet.
But they are still able to reproduce, regardless of those changes.
And that's true. In my neighborhood back in California, we've got lots of different kinds of dogs. And that's a good example of microevolution, variation between a certain kind of animal.
I dare the creationists to define the word kind. I dare them.
200 different varieties of dogs. 200 different varieties of dogs. Variety.
He was very, very, very close to saying species, but corrected himself because he realized that if he said that, it would just destroy his whole point, his whole argument.
But in the last 150 years, science has failed to substantiate Darwin's claims of macroevolution.
There are mountains of evidence for evolution. We observe macroevolution today.
Which is that all creatures have a common ancestor, and that natural selection, acting on random variation, can explain how fish became amphibians, which became reptiles, which became birds and mammals, and so forth.
So pretty much the fossil record and genetics has absolutely nothing to do with that, right? Can't even support that in the slightest. Is that what you're saying, really?
Okay, he's technically right on a large scale, but the correct definition of macroevolution is through subsequent macroevolution, a species has changed so much that the new species and the original species are no longer able to reproduce. So therefore you can get two things which look almost exactly the same, but are unable to reproduce. That's macroevolution. Whereas you've got many varieties of dogs and they can all reproduce. That's microevolution.
Instead, the fossil record indisputably shows
Indisputably shows. Indisputable.
that the majority, if not all, of the world's 40 phyla, which is the highest category in the animal kingdom, virtually sprang forth with unique new body plans, fully formed, and without transitionary fossils preceding them.
That is complete and utter shit.
This has got to be the biggest load of bullshit I have ever heard in my entire life.
That was a flat-out lie. Every living creature is a transitional, and evolution does not say creatures sprung fully formed just like that.
That is just he pulled that out of his ass and he's showing it to you. If you look at the fossil record, you see simple organisms at the bottom of the geologic column, and the higher up you go, you see more complex ones. He's probably referring to the Cambrian explosion, which happened about 400 million years ago, over the course of 3 to 7 million years. Yeah, that's a lot of springing into action, huh?
There's absolutely no evidence of this gradual evolution that Darwin predicted.
No evidence of none. 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 Zilch. They don't have any.
In fact, if you were to condense the history of the world into one 24-hour period, all of these life forms would have sprung forth in a mere 60 seconds.
That was a straw man. The first life forms were not as complicated as life is now.
That's 60 seconds out of 24 hours. That analogy is taken from Jonathan Well, from the Discovery Institute, by the way. His analogy is referring to a 2-minute period, whereas here we refer as 60 seconds. His analogy was referring to the Cambrian explosion. So if 24 hours represents 4 billion years, that means 60 seconds roughly estimates to around 3 million years. Yeah, that's very fast indeed. Just to mention, the earliest forms of man, Homo habilis, appeared around 2.5 million years ago. Since the first early man, we've evolved over 2.5 million years to where we are now. And that would still happen in just 60 seconds.
Friends, the fossil
Friends. No.
record has just failed to substantiate these grandest claims of Darwinism.
No, they have not failed in the slightest. It seems like you are the one failing.
Even if we did not have a single fossil, we still have plenty of evidence to support macroevolution and common descent.
Darwin knew it was a problem, but he predicted 150 years ago. He said, well, future discoveries will bear out my theory. They haven't.
Yes, they have.
They have. It's proven. The fossil record is massive. Have you even looked at the fossil record? And even without the fossil record, mapping the human genome would only bring up this evolutionary theory even more. Modern science would still come to the exact same conclusion. Evolution is a deductive theory. You cannot avoid it.
And after 2 years after he published The Origin of Species, we found Archaeopteryx.
And when you think of Darwinian evolution makes the claim that a bat and a whale have the same common ancestor, would you not think we would have millions of transitionary fossils between those two?
First off, we have millions of fossils anyway. But when it comes to things like that, we don't need fossils. We really don't need fossils for anything. We can just rely on the molecular tree of life, or the DNA, which we can count the gene differences and the genes that are the same between the bat and the whale. You can figure out, you can triangulate back to where they came from using those two things.
Growing into those two kinds of... We don't.
Yes, we do.
Science has not found it.
Yes, they have. And why are you making it seem like science is some kind of person walking around looking for fossils? Hey, look, science found a fossil.
No wonder that 100 scientists...
Ooh, 100 scientists. This sounds good. Go on, I want to know this fact.
from a wide range of disciplines, with doctorates from places like Cambridge, Stanford, Cornell, Yale, Rutgers, Chicago, Princeton, Berkeley, Purdue, Michigan, and Temple, including professors from Yale Graduate School, MIT, Tulane, recently signed what they call a scientific dissent from Darwinism. This is what they declared. They took out a 2-page magazine ad. And
such a thing as great as this would require more than 2 pages. It would probably require a novel's worth.
said, quote, "We are skeptical of the claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life."
Oh man, Strobel just broke the 9th commandment big time.
The "we are skeptical" blah blah blah. That is a paper from the Discovery Institute.
Those lists of hundreds of scientists who are skeptical about natural selection and evolution, it's just a flat-out lie. At least 88% of the people on that list are not even biologists. Some of them are computer engineers or lawyers, or there was one that was even a park ranger. Many of the biologists on that list have demanded to have their names removed. And guess what? That was 7 years ago.
In other words, the emperor of evolution has no clothes.
It says they are skeptical of natural selection and evolution, and the evidence should be critically examined. But that doesn't mean they just reject evolution.
It's not an attack on evolution, it's an attack on natural selection. Because Darwin didn't propose evolution, he proposed natural selection.
And I agree. And I agree. And I agree.
I'm really glad you finally see the error of your ways, Strobel.
Well, I agree too. I think all scientific evidence should be examined.
I agree. As Mark said, friends, this is not a faith versus science issue.
Yes, it is.
This is science versus science.
No, it's not.
Science versus science? No! There is no contradicting scientific evidence against evolution. None. Not a single thing. If it was somehow found, even the slightest bit that did contradict it, and it stood peer review, that person would win a Nobel Prize.
And I was forced to conclude that believing in Darwinism would require a leap of faith that I was simply unwilling to make.
Believing in evolution does not take a leap of faith. Faith is believing in something with little or no evidence, but evolution has mountains of evidence.
Biochemistry. Biochemistry. Charles Darwin said something very interesting in his writings. He said this, quote, "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, then my theory would absolutely break down."
Well, I guess it's a good thing that nothing like that has ever been found.
That's what he said. And you know what? Biochemist Michael Behe of Lehigh University, who I also interviewed for my book.
You mean Michael Behe, whose works on irreducible complexity have been refuted and rejected by all scientific institutes? You mean the Michael Behe that sentences his 9 children from going to actual real schools and having them homeschooled, i.e. brainwashed, into intelligent design? You mean the Michael Behe whose own biology department in the Lehigh University published an official statement opposing his own views and against intelligent design?
That he interviewed for his book. Notice how he only interviews completely horribly biased people for his book. He only interviews people who agree with his point of view anyway. He never ever interviews people who disagree with him. And you would think that that would make a better case, wouldn't you?
Has demonstrated just that through what he calls molecular machines that are irreducibly complex.
Everything that's been claimed to be irreducible complex has been proven wrong. Irreducible complexity can evolve.
What does he mean by that? Well, he uses a mousetrap as an example.
Great, yes. Let's use something that cannot reproduce and is not even alive as an example to disprove evolution.
Or as an analogy. A mousetrap, you picture it, has basically 5 components. It has a base, it has a metal hammer, it has a spring, it has a catch, and it has a metal bar.
Okay, with the mousetrap, Professor John H. McDonald's actually released something on the net. I'm going to put a link on the side. Released something on the net which shows how the mousetrap can evolve. Kind of. It's a very good thing. It shows how you just get from a simple wire to a full, seemingly irreducibly complex mousetrap.
All of those components must be present, and they must be in the right spatial relationship to each other for the mousetrap to work. If any of those components is absent, the trap doesn't catch half as many mice. It doesn't catch any mouses, mooses, what are they? Little critters, you know, the little ones with the whiskers.
Oh, gosh, are you funny?
Mice. It won't catch any mice at all. Now, evolution cannot produce a biological mechanism akin to the mousetrap all at once. It would be impossible.
All at once, right, because that's exactly what evolution does, right? Everything just goes, what?
Possible for them to come at once? Yeah, I agree. It is impossible. But that's not what evolution is saying, is it?
That is not true. Evolution is a slow process from simplicity to complexity.
Basically, to refute irreducible complexity, I'll use the game Jenga. Because over time, you get the bricks lined up and you get a very simple structure. After that, you remove all the inefficient parts that aren't needed until you get to a point where if you remove any single one of them anymore, the whole thing falls apart. That's why you don't remove them, do you? That is irreducible complexity. However, it can evolve.
for the odds for something biological mechanism like a mousetrap. So all the parts come together at one time. Nobody would suggest that that is at all possible.
Oh, the odds. So he's going to pull the probability card again, right? So remember, 1 in 500 billion.
But here's the thing. There are biological systems analogous to the mousetraps that you cannot produce by numerous successive slight modifications because the precursor system would be missing a part, and therefore it wouldn't function. And there would be no reason for it to continue to exist. Natural selection only chooses systems that are already working. And so you have to have all the parts together. They all have to be in the right relationship with each other for it to work. Missing a part, it doesn't work. So you can't build it slightly over time because it wouldn't function at all until all the parts were present. And if it isn't functioning at all, evolution would not preserve it. When we look at the mousetrap, what do we see? We see obvious signs of an intelligent designer. But what's truly amazing is in the last 50 years, as science has delved into the biological realm, we see the same thing over and over again. We see evidence for an intelligent designer.
Wait, I think I know where this is going.
Don't say it.
Oh, you're not.
Give an example of a biological machine
You're honestly not.
called the bacterial flagellum.
Son of a bitch!
Oh my fucking god.
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
He said it! The bacterial flagellum. This has been debunked years ago. How many times are we gonna have to keep bringing this old dead argument up?
Bacterial flagellum? Are you being serious? I'm too tired. I've seen this thing refuted so many times. I've got a headache. I'm not even doing this anymore. Fuck it. No, just no. Link it to side. That's all.
Link in the sidebar. Link. I don't know what the sidebar is. Link sidebar.
Link in the side.
Some bacteria have little tails on them. And this flagellum is a motor, like a motor. It's like a rotary motor that propels bacteria through fluid. Now, all of the parts of this little bacterial motor, all of the parts have to be present and fully functioning for this thing to work.
How many times are we going to keep bringing this up? It's been debunked years ago. The Matsky model has proven that the bacterial flagellum is reducible.
Now this little motor, it's an amazing thing. It's 1/100,000th of an inch long.
Yeah, you like big numbers like that, don't you?
But it can spin at 10,000 RPMs. It can stop in a quarter turn, and it can spin backwards at 10,000 RPM.
That's cool because you can spout 10,000 points of bullshit in 1 minute, and then turn around and spit out another 10,000 points of bullshit.
Can you believe that? If you know anything about cars, you ever see that Honda S2000 sports car? It can only spin at 9,000 RPMs. This little thing, 100,000th of an inch long, 10,000 RPM, stop at a quarter turn, and backwards 10,000 RPM.
Isn't that fucking amazing?
Howard Berg of Harvard University said it is the most sophisticated motor in the universe. Science, with all of our technology, cannot produce anything like it. He said it is the most efficient motor anywhere. Well, genetic studies have shown that between 30 and 35 proteins are needed to make a functional flagellum, this little motor. If you eliminate one of the parts, it doesn't spin at 5,000 RPM. It doesn't spin at all.
Well, it seems like we're not going to be able to escape this one. You want to talk about the bacterial flagellum? Okay, let's talk about the bacterial flagellum. Some of the bacterial flagellum do function without the L ring or the P ring. In experiments with various bacteria, some of the components have been found helpful, but not absolutely essential. 1/3 of the 497 amino acids in the flagellum have been cut out without harming its function.
And Darwinists have not been able to come up with any rational explanation that would explain how this could have come about by naturalistic means.
None. They have not figured it out at all. None. They just out. They can't. They don't know. No idea. They don't know how it happened. God did it.
So I interviewed Dr. Behe for my book.
Michael Behe's opinion? Really? Well, he's already a creationist, so therefore he's incredibly biased.
And he told me this, quote, My conclusion
My conclusion. Right. We know what your conclusion is going to be.
can be summed up in a single word: design. I say that, he said, based on science.
Science, all the science would agree. Also, Michael B. has recently conceded that irreducible complexity can evolve.
I believe that irreducibly complex systems are strong evidence of a purposeful, intentional design by an intelligent agent. That's his conclusion from the science.
Wrong. His claims are based off of ignorance or lies. And why do I say ignorance? Behe was unaware when he wrote his book that the mechanisms for evolution of irreducible complexity systems have already been discussed 6 decades earlier by Nobel Prize winner Hermann Joseph Muller, and has been common knowledge in the field since then. Behe cannot be forgiven for not doing his homework and for simply falling for the God of the Gaps trap.
Again, it is not from the science. Do not insult science in such a demeaning way, please. Oh. Rioni, 1989, out.
Any idea where the N4B is with respect to us?
About 3 days and 200,000 miles into the flight, Mission Control did miss the significance of a cryptic message from the astronauts.
Hello, I'm Faraday 28.
Rioni, 1989.
Shadiest Spike 2.
This is mind-blowing stuff.
Hey, wait, isn't that Lee Strobel? Isn't he a, lawyer? What's he doing trying to teach science?
One of the most striking discoveries of modern... Let me give you just a few examples. I want to start with my favorite one, which is the force of gravity.
It's my favourite one as well because it has no bearing on life.
The force of gravity is finely tuned to an incomprehensible degree so that life can exist. If you imagine the universe and imagine these giant dials, this, the old Flash Gordon show. Remember those movies? I'm dating myself, but they were great back in the 60s.
All the dials. Now, here you're kind of assuming something. You're assuming that everything in the universe is separate. All the laws of the universe are separate, and that they're working together. When in fact scientists at the moment are working on the grand unified theory. It's not been figured out yet, but it will. String theory hits very close because it gets 3 out of the 4 forces. Well, the point being is that if you want to use dials, then it's not plural.
Science has been that the laws and the constants of physics, the numbers that govern the universe, unexpectedly conspire in an extraordinary way to make the universe habitable for life.
Unexpectedly? What did you expect? Tell us!
How do you know that the fine-tuner wanted to tune everything for life, of all things? Why are you so confidently claiming that everything was fine-tuned for our existence? Isn't it a bit arrogant to be so confidently claiming that the universe was fine-tuned for life just because we are here?
The universe hasn't been calibrated for life. Life is adapted for the universe.
Conspire.
Conspire. I've just got an image of numbers sat in a dark room over a piece of paper, plotting to bring about the revolution of life.
In other words, the universe is finely tuned on a razor's edge in a way that defies mere chance.
Defies chance? What?
Really? How? We derive our constants from pre-existing entities. Since we live in a universe with the constants the way they are, the probability of them turning out that way is 1 in 1. It's completely pointless to be speculating of what could have been when it's physically impossible to begin with. So pretty much your argument is, if things were different, things would be different. Convincing.
Oh, so it sort of raises edge, is it? Let's see what happens when we push it off. The best analogy I can think of is if you get a paint bucket and throw it at a wall, the chance that you get that splash pattern there is negligible. But the fact you've done it defies all chance. But you've done it. You see how it works.
And which points powerfully and is best explained by the existence of a creator.
The existence of a creator. Before I get into that, I have to state life adapts to its environment. And if you're going to say this provides evidence for the existence of a creator, hey, this always puzzled me. Why do they only sell for one creator? Why not two creators? Or multiple creators? How do you know who the creator is? Or what is it? How did this creator come into be? Where did they come from? Or how did they create it? Any of these big questions, they always leave them unanswered.